The room is packed with reporters who smell blood. For weeks, the headlines have been screaming about a house of butterflies in New Jersey, a factory where workers are going insane, hallucinating winged insects and dying in straitjackets. The press calls the product loony gas. The corporations call it the future. To prove the reporters wrong, Thomas Midgley Jr. is about to perform one of the most reckless acts in the history of science. He picks up the flask. It contains pure tetraethyl lead, a substance so toxic that a few drops on the skin can induce psychosis. And he pours it directly over his own hands. He inhales the fumes for 60 seconds. He dries his hands on a handkerchief, looks the reporters in the eye, and delivers the lie that will define the 20th century. I could do this every day without getting any health problems whatsoever. He was lying. He knew he was lying, and that single lie would go on to cost humanity 322 million IQ points, fuel a global crime wave, and tear a hole in the roof of the world. To understand the crime, we have to understand the motive. In the early 1920s, the automotive industry had hit a wall. As car makers tried to build more powerful engines, they encountered a physics problem, the knock. Fuel was exploding too early in the cylinders. It was ruining engines, limiting power, and driving engineers crazy. Enter General Motors. Their head of research, Charles Kettering, and his brilliant protege, Thomas Midgley Jr., were tasked with solving the knock. And here is the tragedy. They solved it almost immediately. In October 1921, Midgley drove a high-compression car from Dayton to Indianapolis. The car ran perfectly. No knock, no damage. The fuel in the tank wasn't lead. It was a blend of 30% alcohol and 70% gasoline. They knew ethanol worked. Midgley himself wrote that alcohol had tremendous advantages and burned clean. So why isn't your car running on ethanol today? Because you can't patent a cornstalk. This brings us to the patent trap. Ethanol is ancient technology. Any farmer with a still could make it. If GM switched to alcohol, the oil giants like Standard Oil would lose their monopoly on the fuel supply. They needed an additive that was complex, synthetic, and most importantly, patentable. They found it in the periodic table's heavy metal section, tetraethyl lead. It silenced the engine knock instantly, but there was a catch. It was a known poison, a neurotoxin that the Romans knew would drive you mad. But GM and Standard Oil did the math. They formed a new company, the Ethyl Corporation, to produce the poison. The profits were staggering. From 1930 to 1937 alone, GM and DuPont would extract nearly $55 million in profits from the venture. In today's money, that is nearly $750 million. They chose the patentable poison over the safe solution. And the first victims wouldn't be the drivers, it would be the men making it. By 1924, the rush to production had turned the factories into death traps. At the Deepwater plant in New Jersey, the workers gave the facility a nickname that sounds like something out of a Stephen King novel. They called it the House of Butterflies. It wasn't a poetic name, it was a symptom. Workers exposed to the concentrated lead fumes began to hallucinate. They saw swarms of insects, butterflies, winged bugs descending on them from the rafters. They were seen brushing these phantoms off their bodies, fighting wars against enemies that didn't exist. At the Standard Oil plant in Bayway, the situation devolved into pure horror. In October 1924, 5 workers died and dozens were hospitalized with severe psychosis. One worker, Ernest Olgert, didn't just die. He died screaming in terror. In his final delirium, he cowered from invisible attackers, shouting, "3 coming at me at once." Another victim, William McSweeney, came home feeling ill. By the next morning, it took 4 men to restrain him in a straitjacket. The lead was stripping away their myelin sheaths, eating their nervous systems from the inside out. And where was the architect of this disaster? Where was Thomas Midgley? Remember the press conference? The hand-washing? It was all theater. Shortly after that stunt, Midgley disappeared. He had been poisoned by his own invention. He fled to Miami to recover. While the workers were dying in straitjackets, Midgley spent over a year convalescing in Florida. The company claimed he just needed fresh air for a cold. In reality, he was battling the very loony gas he swore was impossible. But the machine was already in motion. The government investigated, but with industry-funded scientists like Dr. Robert Cahoe leading the defense, the verdict was rigged. In 1926, the Surgeon General gave the green light. The lead was flowing, and the world was about to get much, much darker. For 50 years, we pumped lead into the atmosphere. It didn't stay in the air. It settled in the soil. It settled in the water. And crucially, it settled in the developing brains of children. Lead is a neurotoxin that mimics calcium. The body welcomes it in, and the brain uses it to build synapses. But lead is an imposter. It damages the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, emotional regulation, and empathy. A lead-poisoned brain isn't just dumber, it is more aggressive. It is less capable of stopping a violent urge. Economist Rick Nevin discovered a terrifying correlation. There's a 23-year lag, the time it takes for a poisoned infant to become a violent young man. Lead emissions peaked in the early 1970s. Violent crime peaked in the early 1990s. It wasn't a coincidence. Nevin's data suggests that up to 90% of the rise in violent crime in the 20th century can be explained by Midgley's invention. We might have poisoned ourselves to extinction if not for one man, Claire Patterson. While trying to determine the age of the Earth, Patterson realized his samples were always contaminated. He built the world's first ultra-sterile clean room to escape the pollution. And when he looked at the ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica, he found the smoking gun. Atmospheric lead had skyrocketed, starting exactly in 1923, the year Midgley's factory opened. Patterson fought the oil companies for decades. They tried to fire him. They tried to silence him, but the data held. Because of Patterson, lead was finally banned, and almost exactly 23 years later, the crime rate plummeted. You'd think one global catastrophe would be enough for one lifetime, but Thomas Midgley was a problem solver, and in 1928, the world had a refrigerator problem. Refrigerators used toxic gases like ammonia. If they leaked, they killed whole families in their sleep. General Motors needed a safe gas. Midgley went back to the periodic table. He invented dichlorofluorofreon. He branded it Freon. It was a miracle. It was non-flammable. It was non-toxic to humans. To prove it, he did what he always did. He put on a show. He inhaled the gas and blew out a candle. The crowd cheered. No toxicity, no fire. It seemed like the perfect invention. But Midgley had a unique talent. He solved immediate problems by creating eternal disasters. Freon was too stable. It didn't break down. It floated up to the stratosphere, where the sun cracked it open, releasing chlorine. Midgley had unwittingly built a chemical weapon that targeted the Earth's shield from UV radiation. By the year 2000, the hole in the ozone layer was 3 times the size of the United States. The final chapter of Midgley's life is a grim, poetic justice. In 1940, the man of constant motion contracted polio. He was paralyzed from the waist down. But his engineer's mind wouldn't let him rest. He refused to be helpless. He designed a complex system of ropes and pulleys to lift himself out of bed. He wanted autonomy. He wanted to solve the problem of his own body. But on the morning of November 2, 1944, the machine malfunctioned. Or perhaps it worked exactly as the universe intended. Thomas Midgley Jr. was found dead, strangled by the ropes of his own invention. The man who suffocated the planet was, in the end, suffocated by his own design. Thomas Midgley Jr. died believing he was a hero. He was a decorated scientist. He held the Priestley Medal. He thought he was making life better. And in the short term, he did. Engines ran smoother. Food stayed fresh. But history is a cruel judge. Historian J.R. McNeill stated that Midgley had more impact on the atmosphere than any other single organism in Earth's history. His legacy is written in the bones of the generation he stupefied. It is measured in the trillions of dollars lost and the millions of violent crimes committed by brains poisoned for profit. Midgley teaches us the most dangerous lesson of all. Just because you can build it doesn't mean you should. And sometimes the things that make our lives easier today are the things that will kill us tomorrow.